Hi there, everyone. I'm so happy that you are joining me here on this YouTube channel. Um, I am Michelle Sullivan, and I am the person that has started this 1 year later Stories of Loss and Overcoming. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this is because of surviving Hurricane Helene in the mountains of western North Carolina. And there are many amazing people here in this area. And I believe that our stories make a difference and they need to be heard. And so, as I was asking individuals to come and participate in this storytelling project, Ruth was the very first person that said, me, I'll do it. So I am so happy, Ruth, that you are joining me today.
Thank you. One of the reasons I was the first is because I've been through more hurricanes than I care to remember.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that. What have you been through?
Well, I grew up in mid-Michigan, moved to Chicago where my most of my adult life was, and my family has a home in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina.
Okay.
My husband's a surfer, so we always tracked when hurricanes were, and most of our vacations took place in eastern North Carolina for the hurricanes, so he could go surfing.
Okay.
And then we eventually got tired of all the snow in Chicago, so we moved down to Southwest Florida, where my family has lived since 1984, 82. And always getting hurricanes down there, but as times have changed and after living there, the hurricanes have been getting scarier and scarier.
Mm. So you and your husband were hurricane, what do they call it? Tornado. What do
Uh,
they
chasers,
chasers? You
storm
you you
chasers.
all were more hurricane chasers then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There
So
was one time I saw my husband, I was up in Chicago and he had flown down, and I'm watching the Weather Channel, and I literally see him in the background jumping off the pier with his surfboard. And it's like,
oh my
no.
goodness. That's so funny. Wow. So I'm sure he's probably gotten some great waves with the surf and everything that comes up with the hurricanes. So not so much in the mountains of western North Carolina. So what happened there?
Yeah, there were two big hurricanes down in Marco Island, Florida, Irma and Ian. And it came, that close to flooding our house. They had talked about storm surge completely flooding the entire island,
Hmm.
and the stress of that, we couldn't handle it anymore, and so we moved to Asheville, North Carolina. And the irony of leaving Florida for hurricanes to come just before Helene, that irony is lost on no one. Everyone has commented, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it."
Right. I know for me as well, my husband is from Charleston, South Carolina. So we went through Hurricane Hugo together was my first hurricane to go through and we drove from Charleston up to Columbia, South Carolina, thinking, that's a good 2 hours, and it wasn't far enough. So I
Right.
wasn't familiar with hurricanes and the strength of storms and that type of thing. I also live in Western North Carolina. Actually, Ruth and I found out we live in the same area, the same city in Arden. And we were so far away. I mean, I've never really thought about hurricanes as far as other than maybe rain, right? Maybe some rain but nothing like what people experience on the coast.
No, no.
So this was a very different type of storm that we experienced in September, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, when I grabbed my mom and we evacuated from Irma down in Florida. We drove up to Atlanta to stay with my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And because of all the trees, the hurricane, it's passing through, but you still have wind and rain. And so they were without power for a week. And here we are waiting for power to come back to Florida so we can return.
Yeah.
And it's just, I did have that experience that, okay, the trees are a factor here in North Carolina or Georgia, or, this center of the country.
Right.
Whereas in Florida, a lot of people don't know that palm trees are actually grasses. They're not
Oh,
trees.
I
So
didn't
they
know
have a
that.
tendency to bend easy. Here they
Okay.
break.
No, not so much. So, um, I have so many things that I want to ask you, and I do want to get to your book cover. And yeah, uh-huh. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about this fictional story that you wrote, Grandma's on the Roof. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'm a mortgage broker, and I was trying to explain reverse mortgages to uh, retirees. And it was such a boring subject. And I love mortgages, and I'm reading the expert books on reverse mortgages, and I'm falling asleep. So it's like, okay, how can I make this more entertaining? And I started off with, all right, we're going to just add related jokes to everything. And the more I got into it, the more I came up with the fictional character Betty.
Mm-hmm.
And I pretty much finished a fictional novel revolving around reverse mortgages. And my publisher goes, "You don't have enough drama. You need more drama in it." I go, "I can't. We just went through Hurricane Ian, and the stress is so much." She just looks at me like, okay, okay, I will add drama. Yeah. So that's when I incorporated the hurricane into the book and how resilience is one of the most important things when it comes to a natural disaster,
Mm,
as well as being prepared. And the whole
yeah.
idea of a reverse mortgage, most people think of it as the mortgage of last resort. I didn't plan for retirement. I need to take the money out of my home.
Mm,
Where really a reverse mortgage, it's better to do it when you don't need it, to have an increasing line of credit so that when you do need it, it's available. Because when you need the money the most, that's when you can't get it. So,
right. Wow. That's so brilliant. Really, I mean, so brilliant how you took and incorporated, I can tell your passion for working with people with mortgages and helping them and when and helping them to be able to see, to look ahead before you needed to be prepared. And I love, and I think I shared with you because I also have a copy of the book that I'm reading right now, and I'm loving it. I really am enjoying it. Now, I'm not the age of the people in the story, but I can already relate to some of the scenarios and things that they're experiencing. And I love it how you hooked me like within the first, I would say first 5, 6 pages of the book. I mean, yeah, and I love it when a writer will do that. Jodi Picoult is another person that
ah,
I love how she'll do that. So I'm looking forward to continuing to read this story, Grandma's on the Roof. And we'll talk a little bit more about that toward the end as far as how people can get your book and learn more about it. So what I wanted to do is just for us, I wanted to just interview you and give you an opportunity to tell some stories about Hurricane Helene. that we experienced. And the reason why I wanted to do this, especially getting close to the 1 year anniversary, is because as a life and grief coach and working with people dealing with trauma, that first anniversary is a big one because it's almost like reliving everything again. And we had a lot of loss and a lot of death here in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And so people, it's interesting, I think, and I just got this question a few days ago where someone said, well, you all are back to normal now, right? Everything's good. And I said,
Yeah.
no, we're not. We're not okay. We're still adjusting to this different area, this different because so much changed. So, giving you the opportunity just to talk about some of your experiences. So, I wanted to start with the question, what do you remember about the days leading up to what happened when the storm hit the mountains?
Well, actually, I was at a business conference in Michigan, and I am watching the weather, and my husband says it has been raining and raining here. And I knew that I needed to change my flight, otherwise I might not get down, back home.
Right.
So instead of leaving the morning of Helene, I left the night before, ended up not getting home until like 2 a.m. I mean, it was Atlanta. I had to connect through there, and it was a mess. And so I knew the effects because we've been studying it so long, my husband and I, um, we have essentially been hurricane chasers. Uh,
Yeah.
and um, so I knew I needed to get here, got here. There'd been lots of rain and flooding, and was tired, went to bed. My husband has a lot of trouble sleeping. Power went out, and so the air conditioning went out, and their fan, I don't even know if it was air conditioning, but the fan stopped, so he was hot. He came downstairs and he watched like a 120-foot tree fall over on the neighbor's house.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And another tree had fallen from across the street and was almost blocking our driveway. So he's like, okay, maybe I should, move the car so it doesn't get hit. We actually have two driveways. So he moved it to the other driveway. And we were really lucky in the fact that when we first moved to Asheville, we looked around and the trees had not been well maintained. You have a lot of nature here where, a bunch of smaller trees pop up and they, starve the bigger trees or whatnot. So we had spent thousands of dollars trimming
Mhm.
all of our trees. And we were thinking ice storms,
Yeah,
we were
right.
thinking wind. We were not thinking hurricane. And so we got really lucky that us personally didn't have any damage to our home.
Hmm.
But I would estimate about one in every seven homes in our neighborhood had to get a new roof or had, serious damage. You walk the streets and you just count the blue tarps.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing also, because since we were without power for such a long period of time, there's not a whole lot to do. It is hot. So I sat out on my porch a lot
Right.
and seeing the Black Hawk helicopters flying over. Constant.
Yeah. Yeah. When like you said, we're both in Arden. And when people say it was like a war zone, we're really close to the airport.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was like a war zone because you heard those helicopters
Hmm.
constantly.
Right.
And what the general public doesn't know about that is they were dropping off food and water, and they were dropping off bridges,
Yeah.
makeshift bridges and
Yeah.
telephone poles, things like that. So
Mhm.
for weeks, you just you had that sound of
Right.
constant helicopters.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I'm sure, I mean, I know for me, I I feel like everything hit, but I had no idea what was going on around us. Did you have a similar experience or
Yeah, one of the things, and it's kind of looking in the rearview mirror, backseat driver, that at just before the power went out, got the alert on our phone, flash flood warnings, and it's like to me, I read that is okay, don't get in your car.
mm,
And then after the hurricane or the damage here in the area, you heard people complaining, we never got any warning. And I'm like, well,
mhm,
even if you did, that warning simply said flash flood. And growing up in Chicago, where we would get flash floods out of nowhere, what that meant to me is don't get in your car. I'm sorry, who would get that warning and say, oh, I live in the mountains. I need to get to higher land? It's like,
right,
what higher land? There's
right.
no way of knowing. You just can't comprehend. On a tropical island, yeah, it's
Mm,
like, okay, we need to evacuate from the island. But if you miss that opportunity to evacuate, you do not get in your car.
no, no,
Get
and
on the roof.
yes, yeah, yeah, and I think I think I had read, that this was a 1 in 1,000 year weather event for Western North Carolina. I really think there probably was no way that any of us could have even imagined that it was going to be of the magnitude that it was.
Well,
Um,
I did, however, experience some PTSD from it because I nearly died in Hurricane Floyd
oh,
25 years ago or 26 years ago. It was 25 years before Helene, and it was in eastern North Carolina.
okay.
And we had to evacuate. We were inland. We have a house on the coast, a family home. And so we left the family home because you don't want to be, you know, in the heart of it if it's going to be bad, to an aunt and uncle's home. And when the eye passed over there, we hopped in the car, and this was before, cell phone GPS maps, that we had paper maps and we'd be driving along, and it was all of the street signs said dead end. And that used to be a pet
Ooh,
peeve of mine. Why would the name of a street be dead end? Because how do you identify one from the other? But when you're trying to evacuate from a hurricane, suddenly it's like, oh, I'm so glad. And we'd meet an intersection. There'd be three other people, in different cars, and we'd go on the hood of the car and say, okay, this road's washed out, this road's washed out. And what should have taken 2 hours for us to get to Raleigh to fly back home took us about 10 hours.
oh my goodness.
We had to drive up to Virginia and then back down.
Wow.
Well, during that drive, it was the same sort of situation as Helene, that it had been raining for so long prior to the hurricane that there was nowhere for new water to go. And what I saw there were thousands and thousands of dead chickens and pigs floating about window level to us.
Mm,
And it took me 3 years after that to even mention the hurricane and what we went through.
yeah,
And I still have trouble telling the full story of how we nearly died.
yeah.
But one of the things that happened afterwards is I did children's birthday parties. And one of the songs I did was the unicorn song, where you have green alligators and long neck geese, humpty-back camels, and some chimpanzees. And the birthday girl would have a stuffed animal of a unicorn. And, whenever the song said unicorn, she'd raise it. And, all the other kids had the animals. And I did this after the hurricane, and I just burst out crying. And I
Mm,
couldn't do that song ever again.
mm, yeah. So you already had several experiences before Hurricane Helene.
Right, right.
Yeah, and talking about the PTSD, I know that for me, even now, whenever I am a weather watcher, and so when the winds get really high and it's raining, I also get very anxious about that because of just what we experienced, and I feel very uneasy because the trees are tall.
Right,
They're
right.
tall where we are, and so at your home, you said that trees were down in your driveway, but nothing hit your home in particular. So tell me a little bit about after the storm, what you and your husband how what did you all do?
Well, one of the things that we're really big on is being prepared for tragedy.
Okay.
So we hopped in the car to see if it was possible to make it to a hospital. We weren't
Okay.
expecting to, but that's part of
Yeah.
planning in advance. And we got out and it was like, no, I'm not sure we could,
Hmm.
that so many huge trees were blocking streets and the
Right.
traffic was terrible. And we knew I it's kind of a catch 22 when it comes preparing for storms or electrical outages that you want to have food, but you don't want food that's gonna go to waste because you don't have power. And so it was all of those. It's like, okay, we know we're not going to be able to get gas. We know we're not going to be able to get groceries. And so we came back home and figured, all right, we're going to hop in the car, put the dogs in the car, and go visit mom down in Florida.
Okay.
Because we also knew from our experience of Hurricane Floyd 25 years ago that 1/3 of all the roads in Eastern Carolina were wiped out by that hurricane. And these waters, one of the things we learned from a different hurricane in Eastern North Carolina is that the rivers keep rising even after the storm's gone. So
Right.
we knew there was potential for more roads to be washed out.
Yeah.
So we gave all of our food to neighbors. And what's great about this area here is you have gas stoves and you have grills, and so you can cook up the food.
Right. Yeah.
And we went down to Florida. We were then having to evacuate from Florida for Hurricane Milton to come back here.
Oh no. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How much HIJKLM? So how long were you in Florida before you had
Less
to?
than 2 weeks. It was only about a week later. There were a bunch of, they pop up all over.
They do. They do. So I know for us, we live in Royal Pines. So lots of trees in Royal Pines. And it's a mountainy neighborhood anyway. One of the things that we discovered is we've lived in the neighborhood long enough that we know there's more than one way to get in and out of the neighborhood.
Right.
And so it was a bit like we would go one way and trees were totally blocking the road, multiple trees. So we would turn around, go another direction to then find out, okay, this is not passable as well, and just trying to figure out our way out. And I think one of the things that I love so much about our neighborhood is I saw people walking up to the top of the road, um, my friend Christopher and his partner, their house, you couldn't see it because of all the trees that were down in their yard. And those trees were also across the road. And so people came together just like the day of, cutting trees to clear a path to get to Sweeten Creek Road.
Right.
Yeah. Did I know that you said you left, but did you see any people trying to come together in your area?
One of the humorous things is that we were the only ones in our neighborhood with a generator
Okay.
because in Florida, you lose power for a week or two. Yeah, you need a generator. And
Right.
we were thinking, you know, ice storms and things like that.
Hmm.
But we were the only people in the neighborhood that didn't own a chainsaw.
Okay.
Everyone here owns a chainsaw. So yeah, we had and oh my gosh, Samaritan's Purse and the charities, seeing them just flock in here with chainsaws and knowing how to take care of these gigantic, huge trees.
Right.
It truly is amazing.
Yeah.
And one of the things North Carolina is known for is, taking care of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you interesting thing with us is we had a water issue before the hurricane hit. So our water was, oh, we had a leak
Oh,
in our yard. And so we had already 10 days before the storm. So we already had water saved, not knowing then this was going to happen, when we all had no water. That was, and just trying to figure out how are we going to survive here, and we did buy a generator the day before we went to Harbor Freight, and they
oh
had a
wow.
few, and so we bought one. And my husband is another one of those people that is prepared. He likes to be prepared. And I remember when he bought a camp stove, and I said, John, we don't even go camping. Why are you buying a camp stove? And he said, you never know when we might need it. And so we were able to run the generator and also use the gas camp stove to cook food and that type of thing out in the garage. And I said, I will never complain again about about your being prepared because it really did help. And
Well, we didn't have water stored up here. We gave away a lot of our hurricane supplies when we moved.
right,
And that's something that we would normally do. Oh, you fill up the bathtub with water and you have a bunch of things. Luckily, I think it was during the night that I took a bunch of mason jars and filled them with water, put them in the refrigerator and plastic containers. I put them in the freezer, which was helpful for the neighbors that I used that to freeze the food that I gave to them.
hmm.
And as we were leaving, my husband, was taking a shower before we hopped in the car, and the water started drizzling just at the very end of his shower. And it's like, yeah, we made the right choice by leaving. But
Yeah,
who would have ever expected it'd be, from September to Thanksgiving before we even got water back?
right. And I will say too, I was so, even when we did get the water back, I was so used to not using the water from the sink that I didn't trust it. I didn't trust it. I didn't want to use the water.
Well,
Um,
we brought back a bunch of Amazon purchases for, filtering your own water and we are now prepared for stuff like that.
right, exactly. Yeah. So you made it home just before the real damage, that hit the area happened. Was there a moment with this particular storm that you feel feared for your life or no?
No, I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
And you hear what happened in some of the areas, and you know, I kind of expect that on Pine Island where the hurricane came through, and those who hadn't evacuated, they were just lost forever, you
Mm.
know? And to hear some of the horrifying stories about, a wife going through the breezeway to the garage to get something that her husband asked for. And while she's in the breezeway, the whole house just gets thrown down the river and she loses her husband and children. I'm like, you can't even imagine stuff like that.
No, no. And we continued to hear story after story of landslides and communities just, not too far from us, Lake Lure and Swannanoa and Craigstown and, just so many different places where people, they just, it was there upon them in no time at all, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um, so, when, um, what do you think helped you the most in the days and the weeks that followed?
Oddly enough, I think it's somewhat human nature to dwell on it. And I watched some of the YouTube videos of Hurricane Floyd because they had had a 25th anniversary and they did some documentaries on it. And looking at it with a 25-year difference,
Mm,
it's like I lived through that. This is what people experienced. And knowing that this, what they have learned in the 25 years, can that help people now? What do they need to know now? Um, and then you get to the point where just walking the dogs and seeing the downed trees is devastating. And that I did call a couple of counselors. You had people that were volunteering their time. Uh, but I couldn't even get time, from those. They were swamped. And it took a good 2 to 3 weeks before it's like, I can't handle it myself anymore. I need to talk to somebody. And
right.
I I think a lot of it had to do with I hadn't made a lot of friends in the area yet. So I didn't have that tight community that a lot of the people here already had.
Hmm.
And it's so important,
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. And did it sounds like you have unfortunately are a veteran around around some of these natural disasters, have being with what the things that you've been through, did that has that changed the way that you see yourself, you and your husband, even as a unit, and what has it changed the way that you see yourself?
I don't think so. Um, I think I've just spent so much time in it that you learn and you prepare. And I do know that some people don't have the full resilience and that they need to ask for, support and friends and get help. Um, I've been through enough tragedies that, okay, I'm gonna survive, but I also know that you can't ignore it and you can't think, oh, I'm going to survive. As a matter of fact, when I came back up here, and Milton ended up being worse in Florida than it was supposed to be. I mean, I knew I had to evacuate because you have windows of time.
Right.
And I literally lost it. Was up all night long, and I call up my mom screaming and crying. And I am not a crier, but the nerves are so raw. And I'm like, you cannot stay in your house. Yes, there has been no damage to your house in all the years that you've been living there since, 1982, lots of hurricanes, but you're still in a flood zone. And this is each hurricane's getting worse. You have to go to my sister. She's further inland. You have to go. She was refusing, and it's like, she doesn't hear me crying hysterically. So, she did leave and her house was fine, but you just never know. You have to be prepared.
Right. So if you could give advice to someone that is going through a disaster now. And we have seen over the course of this summer many floods, just like what we experienced in North Carolina. I'm here in Texas right now, and Kerrville had a disastrous flooding event that happened there, and we're seeing more flash floods and that type of thing. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's going through it? Or even like with your mom, not heeding because I've gone through this many hurricanes and nothing has happened. What would you say to those people to prepare?
What's what's really hard is the large number of people that don't believe that it's getting worse,
Mm,
that it really is. Um, the way the jet stream runs through things, the warmth of the water, things are changing and getting worse. And there is absolutely no way that you know what's about to happen. And you just have to plan for worst case scenario.
mhm,
And once the eye of the storm passes, it might seem like things are okay, but rivers crest. And, especially when you have things funneling in from everywhere else. I think what a lot of people don't understand about Helene is after the fact, they changed the terminology from hurricane to a geological event. And we had all the water saturated, but because of the mountains, the way the winds come through, it started off at 55 miles an hour, but when it gets funneled in, just like downtown Chicago, you have the tall buildings. When the wind comes through, it comes through faster, and it ended up being like 155-mile-an-hour winds.
yeah,
You have to know a lot about uh, weather to anticipate something like that. And a
right,
lot of people don't know about it. And so I just want them to be aware there are things you don't know that are going to affect you. So please, plan for the worst case scenario.
right. Yeah, I think that I've lived in the mountains long enough now that, when we get these warnings, these weather warnings, people and it doesn't happen, then people tend to discredit the meteorologist. Well, it's not 100% science. It's a warning. And how do you heed the warning? And if people don't take seriously the warnings, you could put yourself in a very dangerous situation, you or your family, and so I think for me, without being terribly paranoid, but if there is a warning, I want to be aware of it, I and have in my mind some preparedness just in case. So again, that doesn't make me fearful. It just makes me weather aware.
But I also think one of the horrible situations about what happened here is there was no preparing for some of these people, none
No, there
whatsoever.
really wasn't. No, and that's part of the reason why I want to continue to invite people to tell stories because there are many stories. And for one family, maybe that their house wasn't destroyed by the storm. Another one is flooded, whereas they are on top of their roof trying to survive the floodwaters that are going through their area, and again, there's our stories are important, because I think the stories help us to see and understand how we survived,
Hmm.
and I remember going through this very tender time right after the storm happened and going through lines to get food, and talking with your neighbors and just different individuals. How are you doing? Did you get affected by the storm in some way? Where we were survivors together
Right.
this. I have goosebumps on my arms even just talking about it, but I remember thinking, I don't want this feeling to leave. I want us to have this genuine care and concern for each other, just as fellow Western North Caroliners, and then, radiating out into the country and the world because if it's not happening to you, then you don't really think about it. But when you go through something like this, it does change the way you look at things, for sure. Um, I remember the first time I flew to Texas. It was in no end of October. My mom was wanting me to come, let us love on you, And I was like, I can't leave my husband. I can't leave him. He works at Mission Hospital and had a lot going on there. And he also has a art studio in the River Arts District that he lost. And so we were working very hard to save what we could from the second floor of where his art studio was. Foot and a half of water in his, and he is finally agreeing to let me interview him to tell the story. He's not been able to talk about it.
It's hard.
It is hard because it's like a death. It really and truly is. And so I made a shirt. I was flying to Texas. And it's like, do not try and cheer me up. I am, I am raw and I am like, mm. And so I made this shirt and it said, I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I'm not okay, and that's okay. And I wore that shirt on the airplane because this was the first time I was going to be going outside of the bubble, being around people who had no idea what we've been through, right?
Right.
And people would look at my shirt and then they would avert their eyes. And then I actually had some that would say, "I am so sorry about what happened. How are you?" And it's just taken me a while, to just know that I went through this. I'm okay. I'm not okay, but that's okay,
Right.
But you might want to tread lightly with me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely raw nerves.
Mhm.
And personally, I think it's far worse than a death for the fact that human nature is we're selfish. And if you went through it yourself, and if you lost people and you saw everything else, it's it's harder. It's like you can't get over it. Whereas with a death, it's over. There's no changing it. But
Right.
when it comes to yourself, it's like I don't know how to change things now that,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not doing well.
Right. And because there's reminders everywhere you go,
Walking
everywhere
the
you look.
dogs was depressing. It's like, All right, what are you supposed to do to get better? Oh, go out in nature. Nature was devastating. I don't want to be out there. So you
Exactly.
end up in home in your little cocoon and, self-pity, and it makes it worse.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I think that this 1 year anniversary is going to be one for us just to be able to look back over the year, what we experienced, what we've been through, and where we are right now. And again, with me as a life and grief coach, I work with people around processing the losses in their lives, and talking about it, holding space is very important. So I just wanted to say before we wrap up, thank you so much for your open heart and your transparency and sharing, and I love just hearing stories of resilience. And before we wrap up, tell us about your book, Grandma's on the Roof. Tell us about it and where people can get it.
It's available on Amazon, and hopefully, if you just search Grandma's on the Roof and Ruth or Marco Island, it should come up because no one should have to try and spell my last name. Um, and if you have any trouble, you can always just contact me directly, ruth@nexamortgage.com, or my phone number, 828-888-LOAN. But one of the things with Grandma's on the Roof is I wanted to inject a lot of humor. And I have a very lighthearted take on the hurricanes. Yes, they face tragedy, but sometimes all you can do is laugh, like, how can it get worse? And then it gets worse. And you
Yeah.
just keep laughing at those horrible situations.
Yeah.
So when I had a lot of trouble coming up with the title, and it was actually a writers group here in Asheville that helped me come up with the title. We went through like 40 different ones and just brainstorming. And there's a joke in there, a famous joke about Grandma's on the Roof, but there's also several other indications of, literally, I was at my mom's house during the hurricane, and a friend called and said her aunt was on the roof. She was only a mile from me, and we were sitting in dry ground, and yet, a mile away,
Yeah.
she is in peril on the roof.
Mm.
So, I put a lot of humor in it. It's interesting how, here at my house, I'm literally staring at the neighbor's house. They're still not in it. Their house was damaged. They're still not in it. And down in Florida, the book takes place in Marco Island, which is kind of a more dangerous area because it's just a 4 mile island and could be wiped out. And the other person living in Cape Coral, which is much bigger area, that not all of it got hurt, but that's closer to where the main devastation is. And so I look at the different areas and how they're affected by it. And so, some people it's like, okay, let's just make light of the whole situation because you don't know how bad it is at the place that's totally can't comprehend and deal with it.
Right. And I think also because of the age of your characters, if you are, I would say in your 50s, 60s, and you have aging parents, which I do. I have parents that are in their 80s. A lot of the scenarios that you bring up are very relatable, from just living life in this world and falling prey to scams and, the loss of pets and, just and going through not even knowing how to use a computer or your a phone, and so it's very, very relatable. So I love the characters that you've developed, and I'm really looking forward to finishing reading the book. So thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared with us today.
Thank you. And a shout out to the Asheville writers group that said, "We want more Betty."
Okay. So are there some do you have another work in progress?
Uh, uh, the next one is more of a business book,
Okay.
but I have started using the character Betty to tell jokes to, keep people engaged. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, and um, I'm using her to help cheer people up.
That's great, Ruth. And I want to just encourage you to continue doing that. Continue using your knowledge in the work that you do, but also your sense of humor to encourage us because we need that in this world today.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching, and stay tuned for our next story.